Well, Edwina, this is such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. And I love having individuals like you who have done amazing things and are doing amazing things with your career. And I just love spotlighting and talking with people like you because you can be an inspiration to people and you don't even know it. And
Hmm.
so I want this platform to create those inspiration moments and get people wanting to specifically read more. But I love just hearing people's stories and allowing them to share. Maybe it resonates with somebody and we just don't know. And so would love for you to start by just telling us more about yourself because I've got your bio pulled up and I've learned a little bit about you, but I want to know more about just your career and what all you've done and just kind of the path you've taken to writing because we want to talk about your book too, The Colors of Home, and how that's led to the authoring of this book.
Well, thanks, Chris. I will say, since you read my bio, you know I do a lot. And I first got started just, I guess, in the publishing industry about 10, 15 years ago. I had started just playing with writing, had no intention to write really at all. And then I had started writing more and more and dove into fiction. And my husband, who you need to champion your wife no matter what she does, decided to champion me in my writing. And he kept going, "You need to go to this writers group. You need to go to this writers group." And I'm like, "I don't want to go." So the day that they were meeting, he pretty much pushed me out of the bed and said, "You're going." And I was downstairs making copies of part of what I was taking. And I got there and was praying, "God, please don't let me be with anybody who's in leadership." And I'm watching the groups break off one by one, and I'm seeing who's left. And the people left were the leaders, like the president and the vice president and the secretary of the group. And then they called my name and said I would be with the leaders. I almost ran to my car. And when I got in the group and they read my piece, because they were reading everybody's piece, there was this quietness. And I thought, oh my gosh, I blew it. And they said, "Where did you learn how to write?" And my comment was, "I homeschool." They're like, "No, where'd you learn how to write?" "I homeschool." And that's how I got involved with this writing group. And I learned how to fine tune the craft. And more than anything, I learned how to edit. So I got involved with conferences and the rest exploded from there.
Yeah. That's incredible. Yeah, because I was reading about like your publishing work. So you've been around writing and individuals who are putting work together. But it's interesting that you never thought of yourself as a writer or wanting to put a book together and put that out there. So it's really interesting how it's funny how God works in mysterious ways, right? Like your husband pushes you to do something, you're a little uncomfortable, you get around people that you're like, this is not going to be good, but it's just incredible those moments you in because I've had several of those myself, and I'm like, thank you for getting me out of my comfort zone a little bit. Like I wouldn't have been able to do this without a little bit of a nudge. So it's really cool to hear your take on that as well because I love hearing when people get uncomfortable and the awesome things that happens when you do that.
And the interesting thing with all of it is I did write a book. I have what they call the shelved manuscripts. But what I discovered was my audience, I was writing to people of color. Not just them, but most of the characters in my book were people of color or the marginalized community. And when I was pitching it, I was told by a number of people they didn't know the audience that I would find to read my material. So I stepped back for about 5 years and said, "God, teach me the industry." And that's when things started taking off. I became a managing editor, had no idea what that meant. And from there, I call it the tidal wave of blessings because within the last 8 years is when everything started happening. And I kept thinking about this book. God, when do I publish? And this was the year. And what was amazing in all of that is I felt like God showed me I wouldn't have been able to do everything else He called me to do if I was only focused on writing.
Yeah. It all happens at the right time, right?
It does.
Yeah, I love that. Well, talk specifically about your book and don't give too much away, but talk about just your message that you have with it and what you're wanting people to take away from it when they read your book. Because you talk a little bit about your audience and who it's for, but deep dive into that a little bit.
The book really is about restoration. It's about finding home. The main character has to leave what was home, which was Colorado, with her three children after her husband died. And she's wondering if she'll ever find home again in a very small town in North Carolina. And she's not Southern. So it's the things that she goes through, it's the challenges, it's is she willing to allow people into her, and is she willing to identify that home doesn't have to be a place, but it's with the people you're part of. So she goes through heartache. Her kids go through heartache. I grew up in small town North Carolina, so I know some of the challenges that she faces. But to watch her change, she had been shutting people out and what it meant for her to let people in and help her with the challenges that her children are facing.
So it sounds like you incorporated a little bit of maybe some of your personal experiences into this character and the character's story then.
I have. And I'm hoping it's going to, I mean, it's a book that's challenging to read. It doesn't tie up with a bow. And not only from my life growing up, but also my family. We are all shades of the brown rainbow. And people have often asked us if we belong together. Um, of our four children, our first, she looks like she's from India. Our second is so fair that when he was growing up with his best friend, I used to think people are going to look at him and think he's white. And then we have a set of twins who look nothing alike. One, I call him my caramel child because he's got that caramel colored hair, eyes match, and he has blonde hair all over his body. And then the last one is the darkest in the family and the only one who can sport an afro. So when we would go out as a family, and I could tell when people would look, it would be like, okay, who's adopted?
Yeah.
And she goes through some of that in the book because her oldest is kind of that caramel complexion, but he has green eyes like his father. The second one is very fair. And you see him struggle with his identity in this small town. Which way is he going to go? And then the youngest is a beautiful girl who has Down syndrome, incorporating a lot. And there's a number of places where you will find issues.
Yeah. No, this is so interesting, Edwina. I'd like to know more of just like keep going with this a little bit because I'm learning a lot from you, and I can tell like what you're wanting to put out there, the struggles people go through, like how to be in a way more inclusive, like better understand people, like dig in and be curious, and how do people adapt in these situations that I know people go through. So I know you're talking to people out there and you're wanting them to experience, or better yet, like learn how to get through an experience that may be a little bit challenging. And I find these stories so again just interesting to me because I've thankfully, I love being curious and learning about people, but I also realize like there's a lot of situations I've never been in and I don't know what it's like to go through some of these things. And so I guess what I'm asking is when people read your book, what are some lessons and what are some things you're wanting people to really take away from it and pick up on what you're trying to put out there?
I think what I want people to walk away with is in order for us to be all that we need to be, we have to look outside of our own lenses. We have our own culture, our own community. And like you had said earlier, we have to step outside of that comfort zone. And it's not just a comfort zone of what a lot of people think black and white. It's a comfort zone of culture. It's a comfort zone of step out to things that you don't understand. Ask questions. Don't make assumptions. And that's a lot of what's going on both sides. There are assumptions being made. And Ebony, the main character, and her name is intentional because do you know what Ebony means?
I do not.
Means black.
Okay.
So Ebony comes from the Midwest where she's never had to deal with racism or anything like that. So it's there. You see where it is. And then you get to see how she and her family deals with it, as well as seeing people in this small town who rally around her and try to help her understand what she is stepping into. And I'm not going to give it away, but there's one character named Dee who can't be any more Southern. And Ebony gets herself in a situation and she says, there's this old song, know when to hold 'em and know when to walk away. And Ebony's like, I know the song. And Dee says, you needed to know when to stay away. And it's that she's learning about the community, and the community is not out to destroy her, but they're people who don't understand her, and she doesn't understand them. So she's gone into this small town with a father-in-law who doesn't like her. And you see how that relationship starts to develop.
Yeah, I like how you kinda started that as, like, talking about culture and going a little bit deeper than just black, white. Because I was thinking, like, even within cultures of just let's just say white, there's someone that looks like me, we can be so different and judge each other thinking, someone from Louisiana and New York, or Washington and Texas. So just within your own kind of culture looking alike, there's so many judgmental things that people can think and they don't, they're just like, you're this way, I'm this way. So like even at the base of it all, there's so many differences. And then yeah, when you get into black, white, Indian, Hispanic, there's so many different cultures that obviously there are differences. And so, but I like the fact that you talk about like looking deeper into it and really diving in to know and learn and be curious and know those differences and open to it. I just think it's a good thing, for people to do. And it is challenging for people to do. It's not an easy thing for people to do. And so, but again, I think that's why it's so important for people like yourself to write a story about it to kind of like guide you through. And maybe it's a little bit of an easier way to learn how to be more open to situations and people. And so I'm glad that you got pushed to write this book because there is a message to it that I think everyone can benefit from if they take a little time to read it and digest it and really critically think about what's going on and maybe it changes your mindset and approach to some things. I just think that's super important.
And Chris, you landed on something, and that is to get people to kind of talk. I want this book to cause people to think through, what are my blind spots?
Hmm.
And I bring some of those up with the characters that have no idea they have blind spots, as well as who can I talk to about this book? This is the type of book that you don't read and go, oh, that was nice and put it down. It's like you want to discuss it with somebody. You want to get their input about what did you think of this? Or do you deal with that? And that's a lot of it. When you said, inside of our own culture, it doesn't matter if we're all white, we're from different places. Well, I married a man from Seattle and I'm from small town North Carolina. You can imagine the things that we had to deal with. And I think I even pull some of that in. Don't make assumptions that on community, everybody is exactly the same. And that also comes out in the book. Don't make assumptions. We're all unique. We're all individuals. And there's going to be some hurt that happens in here. There's going to be some total misunderstanding about what's going on. So how do you work through that? How do you face these challenges? And that's kind of what I want the book to do. Not just one community that I'm trying to reach, but I want multiple communities, multiple ethnic groups, because what's in there can apply to so many people.
Yeah. I love your mission there because we can be so surface level when it comes to certain things. And obviously, like with social media, like you can create a very quick opinion on something or someone. But if you stay at that level, you'll never really know that person or really know the situation. And I love you talking about like wanting to have those conversations, like get a little deeper, be a little more intellectual, like think things out, critically think. And I found even in my life, like I crave that now. Like almost like I hate the surface level discussions where it's just kind of a waste of time. It's like let's dig in a little bit. Let's get to some meat of the conversation and like let's learn something. And so I really love your mission about wanting to dig in deeper and go below the surface and really have some strong discussions, which leads me to like my question of just some of the things you're proud of from this book? And what are some of the, I don't know, some things you've been able to accomplish as far as having some of these conversations? Have you been able to, I don't know, go speak with people, and have you seen an impact from it so far? Or what is your vision for the impact that you can have with it?
Because of all the things I do, I've had an opportunity to speak to a lot of audience about the importance of diversity in the publishing industry. And this book, I feel like, has come full circle to the message that I have there to just give the perspective of, do you honestly know who is controlling the publishing industry? When you think of 90% of those in leadership are white men, and those under them who work for these companies, 80% are white men. So I would champion to get people of color into publishing. But then I realized that's not the issue. It has to start from the top down. And my message has been that for the last 10 plus years. When I first started sharing about the importance of diversity in the publishing industry, I was at a very large conference and so excited for my first talk. And there were over 400 people at this conference. And I sat in my room and couldn't wait because we were going to have a discussion. Chris, no one came to my workshop, not one. And when the director came around and he was so excited and he wanted to find out what happened, and I told him, no one showed up. I'll never forget his words. He said, Edwina, someday people are going to want to hear what you want to share. So in a lot of ways, I feel like the platform that I've had in that area has prepared for the book to come out, because people who know me know that my heart is to see connection in communities. And I say it's messy. If you want to go into this and think it's going to be pretty, it's not. It's messy. And that is also what I bring out of the book, is if this is going to work, we have to pull together. The term Harambe, I should say that right, because people are like, where'd you get that name for the imprint? Well, Harambe is Swahili, and it can mean a coming together. But if you look deeper, it means a pulling together. So for us to connect in the publishing world, especially the Christian publishing world, if we don't work and we don't pull together, our voice is not going to be as strong as God intended for it to be.
Yeah, very important. That's very important. I caught on to something because someone was providing some statistics to me the other day, just as, with Books for Guys mission, trying to get young men interested in reading and making it the cool thing to do, to critically think, dive in and learn about people, not just have a snippet on Instagram, but actually like read about someone maybe you're questioning, what their purpose is or whatnot. But someone was talking to me and they were like, it's interesting that you say that 80 or 90% of leaders in the publishing world are white males, because when we talk about like young men, they get this stigma of like they don't even like to read. So it's kind of weird how like you go from not liking to read at all to all of a sudden running publishing companies, as the group. And someone was talking to me about how just like maybe why young men don't read a lot. And they were showing me how like, 80 or 90% of teachers are female. So like a lot of young guys don't get men to encourage them to read in the first place. It's more sports or doing things this way. And so maybe you don't have as much influence to where these young guys know that reading is a good thing, or they just don't want to admit it because they're, this teacher told me to do it. I don't want to do it. It's a girly thing to do, or something like that. Uh, but it's just fascinating when I hear stats like that, because it just seems so backwards, and it's confusing. This group, how are they running this when, here it's the stats a little different. And so that stuff just really fascinates me to learn, and to get a little messy with it, like challenge it. Why is this the case? How can we do better here? And again, it gets my brain thinking and wanting to figure it out, which, again, which is your purpose here. You're trying to get the question out there. Hey, how can we improve this? What is the issues? What can we do about it? So I love this conversation, Edwina. This is something I'm really enjoying, and I think other people will enjoy too. And I think it'll get people thinking, and just, again, getting below the surface a little bit more.
One of the things I would add to what you're saying about young men not wanting to read, they want to see themselves on the page. They want to be able to see, not all guys, play sports. Not all guys play football or basketball, or they want to see themselves. And if they don't, why read? Because it tells them they're not important. And so as teacher, because I was a teacher, we need to look at how can we be inclusive for every child we're teaching, and that can be done in books. When my kids were younger, I looked hard to find books that really championed people of color. I didn't want them all to play basketball. I didn't want them all to be in sports. I didn't want them all to be growing up inner city and on the street. And that, I think, makes it challenging for somebody to want to read. With our granddaughter, she was sitting in my lap, and I'd gone to the library and I intentionally gotten books that with little girls in there that look like her. And she must have been 3. And I'm reading a story and she goes, "She looks like me." And so I think that also speaks to the male population. Why don't they like to read? What's in it for them? And even the way they learn how to read. I mean, I taught my son how to read. Now, nowadays it would be called graphic novels. Back then it was called comic strips. That's how I taught him how to read, because that was an interest he had. And to find him with Star Wars, that was to boot. I mean, that was the icing on the cake. So I learned my son well enough to know if I want him to read, I have to address his interests. And I feel strongly about that being with young men who read. And even as they become adults, why don't they want to read? Well, as the saying goes, what's in it for them?
Yeah. Well, I like what you talk about the interest piece, and that's really our mission is not to really tell anyone what to read at all. It's more of what are you interested in? Let's get you a book that you'll actually read, and hopefully that'll spark the curiosity of wanting to read another and learn something else. And I use my story. The first book I ever like really loved reading was Tony Dungy's book, Quiet Strength. Yeah, so my grandma got that for me, and I read that in college. I had transferred schools, I didn't know anybody, so it's like a Friday night, and I'm like, "Alright, I'm just gonna, like, sit down and read this book." And I remember I finished it in that weekend. I was like, "Man, this is awesome." So then I got another book and another book, and it led to more personal development, but it was my interest because I loved football. I knew Tony Dungy, not personally, but knew who he was, so I wanted to read his story. And then it led to finance books and business books and then fiction books. And I was like, wow, if I would have known that I loved this, 5, 6 years earlier, like how much more could I have read and learned from these books if I would have just, I don't know, given it a chance or had somebody champion them, with me a little bit younger, a little bit earlier. So that's kind of what our mission is now is like, hey, I think you'll love reading if you get the right book that you're actually interested in. So let's figure out what that is, and that way you can start. So I love that you talk about the interest piece and trying to find that commonality of, hey, that person looks like me, or hey, that person is someone I'm interested in. I want to read about Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan or Peyton Manning. I want to be a great athlete. Well, those guys have books written about them. And some athletes have written their own books now, which is really cool. I love spotlighting those, as well. No, I love that, Edwina. That's exactly the message that I'm trying to put out there, and so I appreciate you, just validating that.
And it's not just one sided. These young men need to make that effort as well.
Mhm.
To I mean, I love what you're doing, trying to get their interest, but they need to decide, what am I interested in? Is there anything in that genre I would read? And that's even an emphasis in my book of stepping out of your comfort zone. What can you do that's going to make that connection? Because now my son enjoys reading. And he still remembers I had him reading this book called Captain Underpants because it encouraged him to read. And so it's not just someone's going to put the book in front of them. I love what your grandmother did. But in the effort to have it put in front of them, then evaluate, why didn't I like it? How could it be different? What area could I look at? So they need to ask for them what would be hard questions.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah, it goes both ways, and hopefully we can do our part in just encouraging them to take that step and to do that. Um, Edwina, I've got one more question for you, and I ask most everyone this who comes on the podcast, as I'm just always curious where interests are. But What is a book or 2 that you've read that that has had a big impact on you, either personally or professionally? And when asked for a good book recommendation, what is a book you like to recommend to others?
Or professionally, for writers, I like to recommend a book called Unleash the Writer Within, and it's by Cecil Murphy. And the reason I recommend it, it has you soul search. Why are you writing? Because if you cannot be transparent, either in fiction or nonfiction, then why are you writing? So that's a book that I have marked up, I have referred to, because you hit those walls of, why am I doing this? And so that's one that I think needs to be on the shelf of any writer. As far as personal, now I love reading what I would call creative nonfiction. It's got the bones of truth, but it's told in literary terms. Like I just finished one called The Girl Behind the Gate, and that's one. But I also thought about one for guys because I knew you were going to ask this question. And it is called, I even had to write it down, The Eighth Detective. Now, if you like, it's got a little suspense to it, but if you like to try to figure things out, it's an excellent book for that. I am hard to fool. I usually figure out books or stories or movies well before they get to the end. This one, I did not
Mm,
until I got into that last chapter because I kept thinking, this happened or that happened. And I got to the end and I was like, whoa, I am a thriller reader. So those would be my recommendation.
cool. I'll have to add those. I'm becoming more of a thriller reader myself just because I like to take a break from just turn the mind off a little bit, get lost in some sort of mystery or intent. I love intensity.
Mhm.
It just kinda sucks me in, whether it's a show or a book. I want some intensity to it or mystery involved, and so, that sounds like a book I would like to read, so I'm gonna add that to my list. But Edwina, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Because again, as I mentioned at the start, these conversations are so important, and it could have an impact on someone that we don't even know it could have an impact on. There's gonna be people who listen, or watch this, and they're gonna take something away from it, and that's the whole point and goal of this. And so, thank you so much for being pushed to write your book and put it out there. I know you're going to do so many good things with it and have so many conversations that lead to positive changes and outcomes and the way people think. And so, just keep doing what you're doing and keep being a positive influence to others and can't wait to see what all you accomplish in moving forward. So thank you, Edwina. This means a lot.
Thank you, Chris, for having me. And I appreciate. Thank you.